Atma Sudurlabaha.
And deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare.
Kamaistaistar Hrdgm Prapadyantenya Devata Tam Tam Niyamam Astaya Prakritya Niyatasvaya.
Those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures.
Yo yo yam yam janum bhakta shalayarchitum ichati tasya tasya chalam shadham tam eva vididam yaham.
I am in everyone's heart as the supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship the demigods, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to some particular deity.
Sadaya Shodaya Yuktas Tasya Radhanam Ihate Labate Tatata Kaman Mayaiva Vihitanitan.
Endowed with such faith, he seeks favors of a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone.
One point about the verse 21. Krishna says here that he, as supersoul in the heart of all living entities, when he notices that this person wants to worship the demigods, then he makes his faith steady so he can devote himself to some particular deity. So that means he's quite neutral. He's allowing the individual free choice to worship the demigods. In fact, he's even giving him the strong faith so that he'll be able to stick with it and he'll be able to get what he desires. So a person who was not neutral wouldn't be able to do that. He would try to influence the person in his own way. Well, Krishna does try to influence the person, but he gives that offering to everyone, every living entity. And just if the living entity has some intelligence, he should be able to understand that there's a Supreme Lord without much difficulty. Or if he hears from any authorities, he can know. And there's all over the world, there are scriptures, and there are people recommending that one should recognize God. So we have to conclude then that he's very neutral, he's very fair. He's not partial, as he says in Bhagavad Gita. Samaham sarvabhuteshu name dveshasti na priyaha evajantumam bhaktya maite teshup chapya. I am the known. I'm not partial to anyone. I'm equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I'm also a friend to him. That's the perfect statement on equality of dealings of God towards all living entities. So no one should try to criticize God that he's not fair, he's not giving everyone a chance. Everyone's got the chance. But some don't want to surrender to Krishna. They think it's a bad thing to be the servant of God. They think you shouldn't be the servant, you should be the master. But the fact is that if we're not servant of Krishna, then we become servant of Maya. And Maya is not nearly as nice a master as Krishna. Krishna is very kind to his his servants. He promises them protection. He'll do anything for them. You see, there's so many examples how Krishna protected Arjuna and protected Prahlad, different circumstances. In fact, Maya, she's not pleased with her servants. Those who worship her, they get punished. We see painting of her. She's on top of she's got the lion is holding down. She's with her trident. She's stabbing him with threefold miseries. So if Maya becomes your master, then you will suffer. If Krishna becomes your master, you get good food, the best food, you get all the best knowledge, best association. So I have so many auspicious things. Now we're going with text 22. Now which one are we on? 22? 23, okay. Antavatupalam tesham tadbhavat yalpamedasam devan devayajo yanti madbhakta yanti mamapi.
Men of
Men of small
small
intelligence
worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet.
vyaktam vyaktim apanam manyate mama bhurayah bhavam majananto mamavyayam anuttamam.
Unintelligent men who know me not think that I have assumed this form and personality. Due to their small intelligence, they do not know my higher nature, which is changeless and supreme.
Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamayam samavritaha mudhoyam navijanati loko mamajam avyayam.
I am
I
never
never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent.
Them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, Yoga Maya, and so the deluded world knows me not, whom unborn and infallible.
Back to 15. Okay. Read the purport.
Purport. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that simply by surrendering oneself unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality, Krishna, one can surmount the stringent laws of material nature. At this point, a question arises. How is it that educated philosophers, scientists, businessmen, administrators, and all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the all-powerful personality of Godhead? Mukti, or liberation from the laws of material nature, is sought by the leaders of mankind in different ways and with great plans and perseverance for a great many years and births. But if that liberation is possible by simply surrendering unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then why don't these intelligent and hardworking leaders adopt this simple method? The Gita answers this question very frankly. Those really learned leaders of society like Brahma, Shiva, Kapila, the Kumaras, Manu, Vyas, Devala, Asita, Janaka, Prahlad, Bali, and later on Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya, and many others were faithful philosophers, politicians, educators, scientists, and so on, surrender to the lotus feet of the Supreme Person, the all-powerful authority. Those who are not actually philosophers, scientists, educators, administrators, and so on, but who pose themselves as such for material gain, do not accept the plan or path of the Supreme Lord. They have no idea of God. They simply manufacture their own worldly plans and consequently complicate the problems of material existence in their vain attempts to solve them. Because material energy, nature, is so powerful, it can resist the unauthorized plans of the atheists and baffle the knowledge of planning commissions. The atheistic plan makers are described herein by the word duskritina, or miscreants. Kritina means one who has performed meritorious work. The atheist plan maker is sometimes very intelligent and meritorious also, because any gigantic plan, good or bad, must take intelligence to execute. But because the atheist's brain is improperly utilized in opposing the plan of the Supreme Lord, the atheistic plan maker is called duskritina, which indicates that his intelligence and efforts are misdirected. In the Gita, it is clearly mentioned that material energy works fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. It has no independent authority. It works as the shadow moves in accordance with the movements of the object. But still, material energy is very powerful, and the atheists, due to his godless temperament, cannot know how it works, nor can he know the plan of the Supreme Lord. Under illusion and the modes of passion and ignorance, all his plans are baffled, as in the case of Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, whose plans were smashed to dust, although they were both materially learned as scientists, philosophers, administrators, and educators. These duskritinas, or miscreants, are of 4 different patterns, as outlined below. Number 1, the mudhas are those who are grossly foolish, like hard-working beasts of burden. They want to enjoy the fruits of their labor by themselves, and so do not want to part with them for the Supreme. The typical example of the beast of burden is the ass. This humble beast is made to work very hard by his master. The ass does not really know for whom he works so hard day and night. He remains satisfied by filling his stomach with a bundle of grass, sleeping for a while under fear of being beaten by his master, and satisfying his sex appetite at the risk of being repeatedly kicked by the opposite party. The ass sings poetry and philosophy sometimes, but this braying only disturbs others. This is the position of the foolish, fruitive worker who does not know for whom he should work. He does not know that karma, action, is meant for yajna, sacrifice. Most often, those who work very hard day and night to clear the burden of self-created duties say that they have no time to hear of the immortality of the living being. To such mudhas, material gains, which are destructible, are life's all in all, despite the fact that the mudhas enjoy only a very small fraction of the fruit of labor. Sometimes they spend sleepless days and nights for fruit of gain, and although they may have ulcers or indigestion, they are satisfied with practically no food. They are simply absorbed in working hard day and night for the benefit of illusory masters, ignorant of their real master. The foolish workers waste their valuable time serving mammon. Unfortunately, they never surrender to the supreme master of all masters, nor do they take time to hear of him from the proper sources. The swine who eat the swill do not care to accept sweetmeats made of sugar and ghee. Similarly, the foolish worker will untiringly continue to hear of the sense-enjoyable tidings of the flickering mundane force that moves the material world.
Number 2, another class of duskritina or miscreant is called the Naradama, or lowest of mankind. Nara means human being and Adama means the lowest. Out of the 8,400,000 different species of living beings, there are 400,000 human species. Out of these, there are numerous lower forms of human life that are mostly uncivilized. The civilized human beings are those who have regulated principles of social, political, and religious life. Those who are socially and politically developed, but who have no religious principles, must be considered Naradamas. Nor is religion without God religion, because the purpose of following religious principles is to know the supreme truth and man's relation with him. In the Gita, the personality of Godhead clearly states that there is no authority above him and that he is the supreme truth. The civilized form of human life is meant for man's reviving the lost consciousness of his eternal relation with the supreme truth, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is all-powerful. Whoever loses this chance is classified as a Naradama. We get information from the revealed scriptures that when the baby is in the mother's womb, an extremely uncomfortable situation, he prays to God for deliverance and promises to worship him alone as soon as he gets out. To pray to God when he is in difficulty is a natural instinct in every living being because he is eternally related with God. But after his deliverance, the child forgets the difficulties of birth and forgets his deliverer also, being influenced by Maya, the illusory energy. It is the duty of the guardians of children to revive the divine consciousness dormant in them. The 10 processes of reformatory ceremonies, as enjoined in the Manusmriti, which is the guide to religious principles, are meant for reviving God consciousness in the system of Varnashram. However, no process is strictly followed now in any part of the world, and therefore 99.9% of the population is Naradam.
So Naradama means lowest of mankind. They live engaging in abominable activities, eating all kinds of rubbish and performing many sinful activities. So they're just that's all they want. They want to enjoy their senses, and so even if they're actually, they appear to be very intelligent and very learned, and they appear to have good qualities, in actuality, their habits are very low, lower than the animals. So that's one group. Next.
When the whole population becomes Naradama, naturally all their so-called education is made null and void by the all-powerful energy of physical nature. According to the standard of the Gita, a learned man is he who sees on equal terms the learned Brahmana, the dog, the cow, the elephant, and the dog-eater. That is the vision of a true devotee. Sri Nityananda Prabhu, who is the incarnation of Godhead as Divine Master, delivered the typical Naradamas, the brothers Jagai and Madhai, and showed how the mercy of a real devotee is bestowed upon the lowest of mankind. So the Naradama who is condemned by the personality of Godhead can again revive his spiritual consciousness only by the mercy of a devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in propagating the Bhagavad Dharma, or activities of the devotees, has recommended that people submissively hear the message of the personality of Godhead. The essence of this message is Bhagavad Gita. The lowest amongst human beings can be delivered by this submissive hearing process only. But unfortunately, they even deny giving an oral reception to these messages, and what to speak of surrendering to the will of the Supreme Lord. Naradamas, or the lowest of mankind, willfully neglect the prime duty of the human being. 3. The next class of Duskritina is called Maya Ya Prahrita Jnana, or those persons who whose erudite knowledge has been nullified by the influence of illusory material energy. They are mostly very learned fellows, great philosophers, poets, literati, scientists, etc. But the illusory energy misguides them, and therefore they disobey the Supreme Lord. There are a great number of Maya Hhdgyanas at the present moment, even amongst the scholars of the Gita. In the Gita, in plain and simple language, it is stated that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is none equal to or greater than him. He is mentioned as the father of Brahma, the original father of all human beings. In fact, Sri Krishna is said to be not only the father of Brahma, but also the father of all species of life. He is the root of the impersonal Brahman and Paramatma, the super soul in every entity, and is his plenary portion. He is the fountainhead of everything, and everyone is advised to surrender unto his lotus feet. Despite all these clear statements, the Mayaya deride the personality of the Supreme Lord and consider him merely another human being. They do not know that the blessed form of human life is designed after the eternal and transcendental feature of the Supreme Lord. All the unauthorized interpretations of the Gita by the class of Mayaya outside the purview of the Parampara system are so many stumbling blocks in the path of spiritual understanding. The deluded interpreters do not surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, nor do they teach others to follow this principle. 4. The last class of Dusratina is called Asaram Bhavam Ashrita, or those of demonic principles. This class is openly atheistic. Some of them argue that the Supreme Lord can never descend upon this material world, but they are unable to give any tangible reasons as to why not. There are others who make him subordinate to the impersonal feature, although the opposite is declared in the Gita. Envious of the Supreme Personality, present an incarnation of his brain, whose very principle of life is to cry the personality of Godhead to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Sri Yamuna Acharya Al-Bandru of South India said, "O my Lord, you are unknowable to persons involved with atheistic principles, despite your uncommon qualities, features, and activities, and despite your personality being confirmed by all the revealed scriptures in the quality of goodness, and despite your being acknowledged by the famous authorities renowned for their depth of knowledge in the transcendental science and situated in the godly qualities. Therefore, 1, grossly foolish persons, 2, the lowest of mankind, 3, the deluded speculators, and 4, the professed atheists, as mentioned above, never surrender unto the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, in spite of all scriptural and authoritative advice." So that's why Srila Prabhupada says that knowledge means to know that everyone in the world is a rascal, because who doesn't surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one of these things. Either one, he's not surrendered to Krishna, so he's either grossly foolish, the lowest of mankind, a deluded speculator, or a professed atheist. So if one isn't a devotee, it's not like okay, he's not a devotee, but this is nice and that's nice and we should follow him in this way and that way. But actually, the scripture explains that if one's not a devotee, he has no good qualities. What is it? Harava Bhaktasya Kuto Mahadguna in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It explains, even if someone has all these different so-called skills and whatnot, because he's riding on the chariot of the mind, he doesn't have any good qualities if he's not a devotee of Krishna. Because they're simply riding on the chariot of the mind. So one day the mind's saying, go this way, go that way, do this. What's the function of the mind? It's just accepting and rejecting. So one day it says, this is good. Next day it says, this is bad. And like this, they have no actually, there's no good basis for anything that they're doing if they're not a devotee of Krishna, because they're just being dragged around by this material mind. And what is the mind? It can be our worst enemy. It's not controlled. There's an analogy that describes that the mind It's just like a drunken monkey that's haunted by a ghost and bitten by a scorpion. And we see that's the quality of the mind. It's such a disgusting thing. The mind of an uncontrolled mind for a conditioned soul, this thing. It just doesn't even make sense. But when that same mind becomes under the shelter of the lotus feet of the devotee of the Lord, when that same mind is engaged in following the instructions of the spiritual master, then it begins to actually make sense and be actually somewhat usable. But before that, we see it's just the most disgusting thing. It's like a criminal. If there was a screen for a person's mind, for a conditioned soul in the material world, and they're walking around and they just see what's on the mind, everybody would be like sentenced to the electric chair. But if the same person comes in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord and takes shelter of his lotus feet, which means they follow his instructions. He puts down the rope and then of his instructions, and then it's their job to firmly cling onto it by following those instructions. Then they can actually gain all the, not just good qualities, but they can gain all the qualities of the demigods, such a person. Because the spiritual master is the representative of all the demigods. He has all good qualities because he's a pure devotee of the Lord. So, like Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport we just read, if one, even Jagai and Madai, who are like the classic sinful people, they can become devotees if they get the mercy of a devotee. Otherwise, such a person, like the situation that all of us have been in since time immemorial, such a person just has to rotate in this material world, sometimes going to hellish planets, sometimes coming back up, thinking, okay, I can try to enjoy again. But this is the position, because the living entity, because we think we can enjoy this material world, then we have to keep suffering again and again, birth after birth, new body, just to try to get some enjoyment. And what is the enjoyment of the material world? The Srimad Bhagavatam describes that it's just like the scratching of an itch, that the gross materialists, they think that sex life is the best thing. I'll use all my time for it. I'll work so hard for it, tax my mind for it. And then what do they get? It's just like the rubbing of two hands together. So when you scratch an itch at first, oh, it feels kind of nice. But then what happens? Then there's blood. And like that, it gets an infection. So this is the so-called material, the so-called happiness that people are working so hard for. She just said is the happiness of the material. Bhagavatam says, Yan maiti grihame kanduya nena kararukam triptyanti neha kripana bahu dukha bhaja kandu tivan manasijam vishaheta diraha. Sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. Grihamedis, so-called grihastas, who have no spiritual knowledge, think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually it is a source of distress. The kripanas, the fools who are just the opposite of brahmanas, are not satisfied by repeated sensuous enjoyment. Those who are dhira, however, who are sober and who tolerate this itching, are not subjected to the sufferings of fools and rascals. So we see if this is the kind of happiness or where we want to put our time and our focus, then we're just a fool and a rascal. Because that's what the Bhagavatam says. If somebody thinks that this material life will make me happy, then they're just a fool and a rascal. Because as it's explained in the science of self-realization, what material desires give you. I'll just find, I've got a screenshot of it. It's really nice because it's so succinct. I just want to get the exact wording right. Okay, here it is. So, as soon as you have some attachment for anything material, it will kick you upon the face, deteriorate, and disappoint you. It's bound to dissatisfy and frustrate you. That's a fact. So, that's why it's so important that we preach the science of Krishna consciousness, because everyone in this material world, they're running on the chariot of the mind, which means they're just being pulled by material desires. So that means the only thing that's happening to everyone, including ourselves, if we don't fully engage in being kicked in the face, and then the thing they want is deteriorating, and then they're getting disappointed and frustrated. So if we save ourselves from getting kicked in the face and help others not get kicked in the face, then we have to preach to them Krishna consciousness. And so that's why Srila Prabhupada explains that knowledge means to know that everyone in this world is a fool or a rascal. Because if someone doesn't surrender to Krishna, then they're wasting their time. So yeah, this is the perfect antidote, is that one who actually wants to surrender to, or one who the one who wants to properly utilize their time, just like what is it? Lord Kapila Dev explains, if such a person associates with material or with persons who are interested in sense gratification and tasty dishes, then he again just goes to hell, just like before. Because he's been in this material world so long, going up and down. So if he again associates with people who are just interested in enjoying the senses and women, then he just goes to hell again. So he just keeps suffering. Therefore, Kapila Dev says one should actually engage all of the time in hearing and chanting about the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. And so how will people know who is the Supreme Godhead Krishna or what to say about him unless and until they get one of these perfect books of Srila Prabhupada that tells them on every page who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna? That tells them on every page that they're not their body, and that all of these material activities won't actually make them happy. That's similar to what we heard in that Hrdgm Swami lecture. And if they get these books, then they are also learning what to do and what not to do. And that's how we also know what to do and what not to do. How to not become like, those four people we read before, like the lowest of mankind, the foolish, the mental speculator. One of them is explaining a person who actually gets the opportunity of devotional service and then misses it. So we don't want to become like that, because we've gotten this opportunity by getting this human form of life. Everyone who we see has this opportunity for devotional service, because that's what the human body is made for, self-realization. That's why there's that really nice verse about how one should, when one gets this rare form of human life, they should immediately endeavor for self-realization. When? Not tomorrow, but 5 minutes ago. They should immediately endeavor for self-realization, because that's what this body is made for. It's this human form of life is just like you have a car, the use of it is to drive. And so even if someone doesn't know much about cars and everything, if he's got the vehicle, he's already like halfway there. You just got to tell him, okay, you put the foot here, you turn the wheel, you use the blinkers and this and that, and then he's driving. So everyone who's got this vehicle of the human form of life, they're like halfway there. They all have the chance to engage in Krishna's service. So any of them, we can engage them in Krishna's service by giving them these books of Srila Prabhupada and giving them some time, inviting them to the temple. That verse about the human form of life, it's a really nice one. Labdva sudurlabhamidam bahusam bhavante manusham artadam anityam apihadiraha turnam yate tanapate danamrityu yavan nishreyasaya vishaya kalu sarvatasyat. After many, many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. Thus, a sober human being should quickly endeavor for the ultimate perfection of life as long as his body, which is always subject to death, has not fallen down and died. After all, sense gratification is available even in the most abominable species of life, whereas Krishna consciousness is only possible for a human being. So that's why one shouldn't engage in sense gratification, because it's available just to the hogs and dogs. So if we make that our goal, then it's just the dog and the hog is doing the same thing. Like we just read, the ass, he works so hard all day at just so he can get a little bit of grass, even though it's all around him. He's got to carry the clothes all around. And then his payment is that he tries to have sex with the female ass while she kicks him in the face. And if he can tolerate the kicking, then he gets to be the one who can have sex with the female donkey. So this is the what materialists are calling enjoyment. But that's not enjoyment. This is enjoyment. Hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one actually hears about Krishna, then they become fully satisfied. The more one hears and chants about Krishna, they're not actually dying in that amount of time. Even though the sun is taking away everyone's life as it comes up and then sets, the person who hears about Krishna, they're actually getting younger because they're coming back to their eternal situation in the spiritual world. So that's why we tried to shorten the program to 8 o'clock, but then Maharaj emphasized that we should actually not shorten our time hearing about Krishna, because the less we hear about Krishna, the more we're dying. But the more we hear about Krishna, the more our life is actually being extended, because we're going back to our eternal life. So that's why we hear about Krishna until 8:20 in the evening from the Bhagavad Gita, because that's Krishna's words. And so some people say, okay, well, I don't want to hear the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, because, I just want to hear the nectar. I want to hear about Krishna's sweet pastimes and the love and the sweetness. And why say anything negative? But that whole purport we just read, where it's talking about, and even just Krishna's words there, he's saying lowest of mankind, the foolish, the unintelligent, this and that. That's also the nectar, because these things are needed in order for us to get out of this material world. If it's just all bliss, it's all love, it's all nice, then when it becomes time to leave this body, we'll say, well, I'll just stay here. It's all bliss, it's all love, it's all nice. What's the point of going to the spiritual world? But one has to see both. They see Krishna and they see Maya, and then they know this is not the place to go back to my real home, back to Godhead with Krishna. So if, we can have a picture, someone might have a living room. Most of us here don't have a living room. We just have a yoga mat. But someone might have a living room and they can have a beautiful picture of baby Krishna on one side, and then they can keep another picture of like war or something like this. And then that way they're always seeing both. There's Krishna and there's Maya. Because then okay, what to do and what not to do. This material world's full of suffering, but everything about Krishna is just full of bliss, full of nectar. So if I see both, then I know, okay, there's nothing to take shelter of in this material world. Not even, so-called mode of goodness things like seeing, sunrise and nice nature scenes and all that. Actually, it's all suffering, because it's all going to get destroyed. And even if you go to the nice nature place, there's tons of mosquitoes that you just don't feel them when you see the picture of the nice nature place. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is always emphasizing in the purports, that the only thing that will actually make people satisfied and actually solve all the problems is pure devotional service, full surrender to Krishna. And so that's what we cultivate just by hearing about Krishna and chanting about him. So those are a few points. Do you guys have any comments and questions?
I just wanted to say that, like, when you said that statement about what happens to our material attachments when what did you say they do? It's they deteriorate. Deteriorate. Disappointed. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because I was thinking, like, while you were saying that, I so I like I think, like, this is a really good example of how family life is like can this is an example of what family life can do, because I mean it's said in the if you have a wife and children, then they're compared to like jackals and vampires or something like that, and they say they suck your blood, and then at night they do whatever they do. And then, but also not just that, your relatives, like your mother, your father, like personally, I'm pretty attached to my mother, but I know she's gonna go one day, and it scares me because I don't know, I depend on her for so much, but I know that eventually
I have to let go of that attachment. And that's really nice that you said that, because yeah, it made me think of how what we should do with our attachments. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that verse that you were saying about the blood sucking, it was a verse that explains that what is it? What's the word for a witch? It's no, but the verse explains that the wife is for the wife is like a tiger during or the wife for the materialist is like a witch during the day and a tiger in the evening, because like a day she's taking all of his blood away in the form that he's working so hard to accumulate wealth and using all of his blood, and then she's taking that wealth. And then a tiger in the evening, because then she's taking his blood in the form of semen through sex life. So like all day and all night he's just being bled in this material situation. But then that point that you were making about the attachment, um, I was just hearing recently that for one to actually be a brahmachari, then they have to become fully convinced, um, and they have to understand that what I'm doing is actually the best thing that I can possibly be doing for for everybody, for myself, for my family, for the whole world. By engaging in Krishna consciousness full time with all my time and energy, which is most available in the brahmachari stage of life, then one is fully, and this is something that we have to understand and, become convinced of through reading, hearing the scripture, hearing from devotees, then one is fully doing the best thing that they could possibly do with their time. There's nothing better. It's not, okay, I could have, gotten that good job and supported my family with a good amount of money. I could have been like a big whatever movie star or like engineer or something. Even if someone could do those things, what's the use? Still, they don't still they might see their family like once a year because they've got some big job like that. And then even if they get all that money can't buy a minute more of someone's life when it's time for them to die. That money can't actually make them happy or their family happy. So what's the use? But if one is fully engaged in Krishna's service, then all their relatives 10 generations back, 10 generations forward are liberated, and they get the chance for devotional service, just like Dhruva Maharaj and his mother. And there's a crying need for people in the world who are willing to take up the activity in Krishna consciousness 24 hours and actually. So for those who are willing to take up that service, which can be done also in the Grihastha ashram, but that generally comes with much more necessities and responsibilities and activities that take someone's time, that usually don't have anything to do with Krishna consciousness generally. But if it can be in the brahmachari ashram, then it's if they're doing that correctly, then it's the most useful situation to engage in Krishna consciousness all of the time, because that's what it's for. It's not for becoming a Srila Prabhupada sometimes said this word vyabichari, which is just the opposite. Someone is just enjoying. So it's not for like being lazy, just enjoying somebody's senses or getting, this is pretty easy and to get along everybody, and I can mosey my way over to the prasad table and get chapatis and be happy. That's not a brahmachari. But for one who's willing, someone asked Srila Prabhupada, is brahmacharya spoken of in the Bhagavatam? And the verse he quoted was that one verse about how one should live in the ashram of the guru, just for this pleasure of the guru. Narada Muni speaking that one. And so that's what a brahmachari is. That okay, the whole purpose of Brahma means spirit, and a brahmachari, the technical meaning is one who moves in spirit. So for one who's actually doing that, they're always engaged in Krishna service, always engaged in serving the Guru Krishna, and especially a lot of also hearing from the scripture, then that's perfect. If somebody can be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, That's the best thing they can do for their family, their society, their nation. So their whole for everybody. So yeah, we can try for that in any position of life and become more convinced of it through reading Srila Prabhupada's books more. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.